Hey, welcome to For You Radio, where the gospel's for the believer and the unbeliever alike. I'm Craig Donofrio, pastor of Redeemer Lutheran Church in Willmar, Minnesota. And you are? You with me?
I'm actually reading. I apologize. Troy Nair, pastor of St. Peter's Lutheran Church, Shaker Heights, Ohio.
Are you reading Field and Stream again? Is that what you're reading?
I was actually reading this commentary on the book of Judges.
Ah, well, that works out pretty well.
Yeah.
Because we're in the book of Judges, so that works.
It's kind of last minute cramming. That's what I was doing. Last minute cramming.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
We are proud to be part of 1517.org's podcast network. Go to 1517.org and check out all the many resources there for you, for your church, and for your edification. There's great stuff to be had at 1517.org. Much of it is free. So, how can you go wrong with a gift like that? Troy, if people wanted to email For You Radio Podcast, how would they do that?
The normal way, emails at foryouradio@1517.org. Those are all words, by the way. I think you probably
You don't
can't
have to
use
spell out dot.
No. And
Yeah.
but you should spell out for. That's FOR, right?
Yes.
Not the number 4 and the letter U. I don't know. Just try it. foryouradio@1517.org.
Hard to go wrong with that. Well, very good. Anything new and exciting that we need to address, Troy? We got email. You got a job offer with the UCC and the email there. Marketing exec or something like that.
I forget. I've already deleted it. It's just one of those headhunter emails like, hey, we've got this job. I think it'd be perfect for you. Like, I don't think it would be.
I was going to double dog dare you to click on the link. It'd probably crash your computer.
It probably would. Yes. Yeah. So.
Yes. Well, we would love to hear from you. And if you have any prayer requests or anything like that, we'd love to hear that too.
Indeed.
Okay.
Anything else? Anything cool going up there in Minnesota?
No.
Nothing cool in Minnesota right now, is there?
No, we've had a rash of hot weather and rainy weather, but things are starting to cool down a little bit. So thanks be to God for that. Had a tornado blow through not too far away from us the other day, and
no kidding.
My secretary at the church, her house got a little damage, but nothing too terrible. A couple downed tree branches and that sort of thing on her deck. But we've been fortunate to avoid all of that drama, so that's great.
Well, since you moved, Cleveland weather has been nothing but perfect, day in and day out. Just the right amount of rain and the right amount of sun. It's just everything you could hope for.
Yep. That's the judgment of God upon me. That's the way it works. So we are in Judges chapter 18. So if you're following along at home, why don't you turn to Judges 18? If you're in the car driving, don't turn to Judges 18.
I'm at 19. Hold on. There, 18.
Wait.
Here we go.
Now you got me confused. I'm in the right chapter, right? It is 18.
You are indeed. Yes, it is 18.
Okay.
Because we just finished 17. And 17 was just dripping with irony and strangeness. And 18 is just even worse. I think it builds upon that same story.
Yeah, just wait until 19, 20, and 21. That's just really
goodness.
Magical stuff going on.
I'm waiting. I'm just waiting. Actually, I had a friend ask me, a friend who listens, said, hey, what are you going to do when you get to those chapters? I'm like, we'll just tell the
truth.
Yeah,
just tell the truth.
Yeah, yep, there you go. Yeah, how are you going to preach on that? Like, in 17, you had this weird story about Micah. He makes a shrine. He makes an ephod. That's a priestly garment. He makes household gods. And then it kind of lands upon this guy who's a Levite, a Levite who should be a priest of the Lord at Shiloh, by the way, where the tabernacle of the Lord currently is. But this Levite's just kind of wandering throughout the land. And he says, okay, why don't you be my priest? Why don't you come and be my father and a priest? And I'm going to, give you a chunk of change every year. And I'll give you clothes. And I'll make life nice for you if you just come worship the gods that I made.
Right. Right. And that will come into play here in chapter 18 as we look into this, the building of your own God, which is always very amazing that there's the propensity of humanity to make our own gods.
Yes. And within this too, in chapter 17, that way it closed out, now I know, this Micah guy says, now I know the Lord will prosper me. And the Lord there, if your English translation probably has all capital letters. So underneath that, of course, is Yahweh. So he has just said, now I know that Yahweh, the covenant God of Israel, the maker of heaven and earth, will prosper me. Why? Because I've stolen one of his priests to be priest over my idols. Micah, I don't think it is going to work out that way for you. But let's see. Why don't we see how it works out for Micah, shall we?
Lead on, Sabu.
I just said for Micah, and I didn't even mean the countertop.
For Micah. Yes.
Anything else? You want to set up 18 anymore? You would good. Should we just roll?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Roll on in there.
So in chapter 18 of the book of Judges, verse 1, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel. And in those days the tribe of the people of Dan was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in. For until then no inheritance among the tribes of Israel had fallen to them. So the people of Dan sent 5 able men from the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. And they said to them, go and explore the land. They came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned aside and said to him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here? And he said to them, well, this is how Micah dealt with me. He's hired me, and I become his priest. They said to him, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed. And the priest said to them, go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord. Pause.
Okay, I'm confused.
Yes.
You have this priest of Yahweh who is also a pagan,
apparently,
who is also a priest of Yahweh, who is and then these guys come along and they recognize him. You wonder if he had wandered through their lands earlier or something, or there's just a lot going on here. It's kind of confusing.
Yeah. So, but here's kind of the key stuff, and I am thankful for this commentary pointing out this. It's a delightful irony. Hey, you remember when Moses and the people of Israel were coming up on the Promised Land? They just come to the wilderness, and Moses did what? He sent people to go spy out the Promised Land and see what it was like.
Yeah. Yeah, the land of milk and honey there.
Yeah, exactly. And so now people of the tribe of Dan are spying out the Promised Land, even though their fellow Israelites live there, and they're looking for a place to take over.
What I find interesting here, and being half Irish myself, I relate to this. They say of the Irish, if they don't have anyone to fight, they'll just fight amongst themselves. And it kind of seems this way with the tribes of Israel, that, we've been dislodged from our land, and we're going to go conquer a land that belongs to our fellow Israelites, right?
Apparently, right? Yeah. I don't even know what to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other part is, too, that no, none of that is true. They had an inheritance. They had an allotment. The Lord God himself, I believe, had said, this is where they shall live. Moses had said that. Joshua had actually declared, okay, this is your section, these cities. Their problem is that they couldn't hold on to it. The Amorites drove them out, and they decided, rather than take faith in the Lord and trust in him to give them success, we're going to go wander around. Maybe there's a weak city we could go take over. It just... Yes.
And that seems exactly what they're up to here is let's go find a city that can't really defend itself, and we'll take that one.
Yeah, it's it leads off with that classic Judges line. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Kind of, again, everybody does what they want to do. And this is no exception. So we open up this chapter dripping with irony, sarcasm, and more than a bit of parody of the initial spy stories of spying out the land. And now we land on this guy from the Levite that belongs to Micah.
In verse 6 here, the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord." I can't help but to scratch my head and say, in spite of this guy's clearly bad theology and clear confusion in this, I think we talked about syncretism a little bit in previous episodes, but the blending of religions together. And he seems to be right in the middle of this. And then he makes this proclamation, "Go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord." Is he really speaking for Yahweh or not? And
go ahead.
We'll see how it plays out. But we have this teaching from the early church that says that God's word and his gifts are not dependent on the faithfulness of your pastor. That's the Donatistic controversy. You can look that up on your own. But, in spite of this guy's really, really bad theology, is he still speaking for God? And it's interesting to consider that. Any thoughts, Troy?
Yes. Just, and I always forget which psalm it is. But there's one of my favorite psalms which basically says, "Hey, the Lord's always watching. The Lord is always watching you." And then you realize, oh, that's so comforting. And then you think, oh, he's always watching.
He's always watching me.
and this verse has that same sort of vibe to it. Yep, yeah. You have this journey you're on. God's watching it the whole way. Yeah, oh, yes, yeah. So Yahweh knows what's going on. He knows what's going on with Micah and this Levite.
The Bible kind of oozes with irony at times, right?
It does. Yes. And of course, the greatest irony, of course, is that we laugh at this and then eventually we see ourselves in the mirror.
Yeah, and it's not as funny as we thought.
Right, yeah. Yeah, just exactly like when you're poking fun at that guy standing across the room, like, oh, look at he's all bald and fat, and oh, it's a mirror.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
No.
I think I've mentioned a couple of times that guy at the Hardee's who is wearing a Ramon shirt, and I'm like, hey, I got a shirt just like that, but that guy's really old. Oh, he's not as old as I thought. He's not as old as I am. I was like, oh.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
All right. Anything else here between 1 and 6 that we should mention in your world there, Troy?
I'm just stuck on look at that old guy in the Ramon shirt. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. No. So let's scoot ahead because we've got some much more important stuff. There's stuff about the tribe of Dan. It's important. It's in the background, but there's the real meat of this story is going to be in the middle.
Okay.
So really, we get 5 guys in verses 7 through 10. We get these 5 guys who are spying out the land, and they find something pretty good, right? Verse 10: as soon as you go, you'll come to an unsuspecting people. The land is spacious, for God has given it to your hands, a place where there's no lack of anything that is in the earth. So, verse 11: 600 men of the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol, and went up and camped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. On this account, that place is called Mahana Dan to this day.
There you go.
Behold, is west of Kiriath Jearim. And they passed on from there to the hand of Ephraim, the hill country of Ephraim, and came to the house of Micah. Here it is. Then the 5 men had gone to scout out the country of Laish, said to their brothers, "Do you know that in these houses there's an ephod, household gods, a carved image, and a metal image? Now, therefore, consider what you will do." And they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite, the house of Micah, and asked him about his welfare. Now the 600 men of the Danites, armed with their weapons of war, stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who had gone to scout the land went up and entered and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with his 600 men armed with weapons of war. And when these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Keep quiet. Put your hand on your mouth and come with us and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be a priest of the house of one man or to be a priest to a tribe and clan in Israel?" And the priest's heart was glad. He took the ephod and the household gods and the carved image and went out along with the people. So, yes, one delightful scene there. 600 men armed with weapons of war, and they ask about his welfare.
Yeah, how you doing?
How you doing?
Boy,
Nice,
it's been a while.
nice
How are the
place
wife
you
and
got
kids,
here.
huh?
Be a shame if something happened to it.
Ooh, yeah.
And also, too, he thinks he's getting a giant job promotion, right? Ooh,
Yeah.
priest
Yeah.
of a whole tribe. Yeah.
He doesn't seem too loyal to his current employer here. I don't know. Maybe he's bored. He's looking to trade up.
Well, yes. So, yeah, if the option is die by the sword or come be a priest of a whole tribe, I think there's probably an easy solution there.
Yeah, it is kind of the offer you can't refuse, right?
Yes. But on the other hand, yeah, from one house to priest of a whole tribe. Now, we should point out, too, does God have his own priest still? Yeah.
Apparently so. Yeah.
This guy is supposed to be one of them, right? And does God have a place in which his priests are to serve? Yes.
Well, yes.
And it's not in Laish. It's currently at Shiloh at the tabernacle.
Right. Where the altar is, where the
Yes.
tabernacle is. Yeah.
So all of this is one of those things. This sounds very good, very, very good to man's ear. But
Yes.
the way, there's a way that seems right to a man. But the scripture says in the end it leads to death.
It's interesting to me that the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, they seem to be an enticement to all these people.
Oh, sure.
And I could see, if you're the people of Yahweh, the ephod might be an enticement because it's a sign of the priesthood of the people of Yahweh. But the other stuff, this bad religion is really contagious, it seems, and has been. Not just through this book, but through the entire Bible. It's an ongoing issue.
Yeah,
and it's an
it
ongoing
is.
issue today, It's an ongoing struggle even as we sit here in front of microphones.
You know what? But God gives us his priests, or in this case, I'm thinking of his pastors. God gives us his pastors, and not so the pastors can enforce their will upon people, but that God can continue to speak to his people and encourage them and strengthen them along the way that they should go.
Right.
We just read this in the book of Ephesians from the 3-year lectionary series this past Sunday, that God gave his church the apostles. First of all, the apostles, and then the prophets, and the evangelists, and the pastors and teachers, and such and so forth. But it's all built upon that same thing, and it's all given for the same reason, that the church of God, the people of God, might be built up.
Yep.
These guys have all that same stuff, only in the Old Testament equivalent, but they don't want what God is giving.
Yeah.
They like their own stuff, and you're exactly right that this stuff. I mean, folks, this stuff is infectious. I mean, you kind of slip into idolatry in one little place, and pretty soon you're slipping in like 12 different places.
Yeah, the temptation for pastors is to be popular or to be faithful at times. And the goal is to be faithful and bring popularity to Christ, not to yourself. But, we're fallen people. So we do stupid things just like these people have and are doing stupid things here.
Isn't that true? And yet I think a good pastor is not one who's without sin, but a good pastor is one who sees a sin very quickly and repents of it, rather than let it take him over. What we have here in Judges are people that have been taken over by sin, so they don't even understand the very stupid things they're saying.
Right. I was asked recently when I stand up to preach during the hymn just before the sermon, and I, stand facing the altar and I say a quick prayer. And I was asked, what do you pray? And I said, basically that I might not get in the way of God. And I think that needs to be our constant prayer, that my ego, my meanness, my sin, my desire to be cute or funny or whatever doesn't get in the way of the gospel, that God would keep me out of his way. And I think that that's one of the problems that we see here and what we see in the church is, pastors want to be loved. And sometimes pastors are willing to want to be loved to the detriment of their calling.
Mm-hmm.
And we ought never go there. And yet it's a very real and strong temptation all the time.
Oh, yes. It is. Very much so.
Yep.
Very much so. Back to the text, shall we?
Yep.
Like good pastors ought to do. Let's go back to the text.
Yep.
So they turned and departed, putting the little ones and the livestock and the goods in front of them. Odd, but we'll come back to that. When they had gone a distance from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house were called out, and they overtook the people of Dan. And they shouted to the people of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you? You come with such a company." And he said, "You take my gods that I made and the priest and go away, and what have I left? How then do you ask me what is the matter with you?" The people of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household." The people of Dan went their way. And Micah saw they were too strong for him. He turned and went back to his home.
Yeah. Maybe you should just walk off here, little man.
Yeah. And the people of Dan said to him, "You don't want none of this."
Right. I love verse 24 though, and we had a lot of fun with this before we even started recording. He said, "You take my gods that I made and the priest and go away with what have I left?" It's the my gods that I made.
Yeah.
Isn't that just? I mean, that says it all. That we create our own gods in our image. And then how dare you take away my false god? Who do you think you are?
Yes. I just, and again, just dripping with irony. My God that I made. What? You don't make a god. You know what? If you can make a god, it's a bad god.
Well, okay, so let's put this in a modern context. I'm building my new house, and I'm not really. I mean, you don't want me to build a house. That would be a bad idea.
Okay.
Just from the get-go. But let's say I'm building my new house and I'm putting all my effort into it and I'm putting all my time into it and everything. And all of a sudden someone puts a lien on my house. How dare you put a lien on my house? This is what I'm making for me and for my family. And who do you think you are to come and put a lien on this thing? Multiply that by a lot more, because these guys are able to just take it all away by force. I guess you could say maybe property taxes or something. But they come and take it away. Hey, this is my God. I worship this, and now you're taking away my thing of worship. Well, what are you left with? Maybe you're left with the one true God that you can worship instead, right, pal?
Nice one.
Huh?
Yeah, shouldn't they? That would have been nice if they would have said that. Yeah,
right?
We're helping you. We're doing you a favor.
So maybe God in his irony is saying, "Hey, I'm sending these bullies over to take away your stuff so that maybe you will be set back to zero and realize who your God is." I kind of hope that that's how it had turned out. I don't know.
So if you want to have some fun, go to Isaiah chapter 44, and you will read a fascinating little bit there where, frankly, sometimes God is sarcastic. I just got to say it.
No.
It just sometimes, because stuff like this demands a little bit of biting sarcasm. In Isaiah 44, there's a story of a guy who plants a cedar tree and grows it and nurses it and cuts it down. And he, with half of the tree, he kindles a fire and he bakes his bread. Then he warms his house and he sits down in front of it. And the other half of the tree, he makes an idol and he worships it. And the line there, the rest of it, he makes him to God, his idol, and falls down to it and worships it. He prays to it and says, "Deliver me, for you are my God." Deliver me, you thing that
yeah.
I made with my own hands. Oh, my.
Yeah. How many times have we bought that one thing that we think is going to bring us joy? And maybe it does for a little while. You know, we have our shiny new toy. And then the newness rubs off and you're on to your next one.
Yeah.
You know, your next shiny new toy and that sort of thing. That's idolatry the same way.
In that same way. But in Isaiah and Judges both, so what you're talking about is a delusion. Oh, I'm going to find my comfort in this thing. These guys deliberately set out to make a god. However, as Martin Luther says in his large catechism, whatever you find your comfort and your security in, that, I say to you, is your God. Whatever you look to for all good, that is your God. And so Micah was looking to this thing that he had carved and said, oh, that's the thing that's going to give me blessing and goodness. And what you're talking about is like, oh, here's a house. That's going to thing that the house or the car or the whatever, that's going to be the thing that makes my life good, finally, that I'll get peace from. That's your God.
Let's remember also that this rolls back to stolen money to begin with. And
good one.
His mama, he gives the money back because his mama spoke a curse over this thing. And then she gives him a certain amount of silver to make this ephod with. And by the way, while you're at it, if you want to make a couple gods, that's good too. And there you have it.
So in the whole irony of chapter 18 thus far, we have a tribe of the people of God who are looking for land in the promised land of God that they can take over from one of their brother tribes of the people of God. They had their own inheritance. They weren't able to keep it. They don't trust God to do these things, and they eventually come to this house where there's a false priest with false gods and false comfort and false everything, and they say, this is just what we need for our new city. Yeah.
All right. So we're pretty much out of time here, but
let's roll it.
Should we wrap it up there, or you got any other last thoughts on it?
We've got like 3 minutes, right?
All right, go for it.
But the people of Dan took what Micah had made and the priest who belonged to him, and they came to Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting, and struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. And there was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob, and they rebuilt the city and lived in it, and they named the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their ancestor. It was born in Israel, but the name of that city was Laish at the first. The people of Dan set up the carved images for themselves, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons were priests in the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up Micah's carved images that he made, as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. Now,
it ain't here; it's in Shiloh.
Yes,
that's where you got to go.
The final verse is the final piece of irony that just drips from these pages. Right. On their journey from the hill country of Ephraim back up to this city of Dan or Laish, if you look at the map, as I'm currently doing right this second, Laish is way to the north, far above the Sea of Galilee, far above everything. You got to go through the mountains. And as you go through the mountains, you know what you pass by?
Shiloh.
The city of Shiloh.
where the tabernacle is.
And yes,
where Yahweh is residing.
They walk right by the place where Yahweh lives, where Yahweh promises to dwell with his people. And they say, we've got this other city we're going to go take over.
Yeah, and we got our own gods,
yep.
So we don't really need that one, alone. We have that one, along with others. It's all good.
Yeah. Hey, the people in this city are simps. We'll be able to take them over, no problem. And because we got these gods.
Well, we'll stop here for now. Next time we pick up with a Benjaminite. I can't say that very well. And his concubine. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be saucy. Till next time, God's peace. For You Radio is a 1517.org production. To listen to this radio broadcast and broadcasts like this one, I invite you to visit 1517.org. There you will also find many publications and free resources, including classes on Christian apologetics, church history, philosophy, and so much more. We are completely funded by generous donors like you. Would you consider making a generous gift to our work of spreading the gospel? Simply visit 1517.org.